Welcome to the Mental Militia, uniting minds and freeing souls from the bonds of mental slavery and ruling class manipulation.
Brandon Joe, take two.
Perfect.
All right.
So getting back into it, it's like, I think the most powerful area to learn is negotiable instruments. And the thing is that there's not a lot of people who get into that. They get into this whole living man, and they get into like all these other things, and they get into like these secret Social Security trust accounts. They get into all these other things that I've never really seen very many people or anybody really have any success in. I went down a lot of those paths, and I wasn't able to get any traction, and I just said, fuck it, I'm not going to keep trying. I did a whole bunch of things at the beginning. I had this guy named John who I was working with who actually lives here in LA, and he's been doing a lot of this stuff for 50, 60, 70 years. I don't know, since like the 50s or 60s he's been doing. He's like really older guy, really cool dude, right? And I told him, I said, I want to buy every service you sell. He's never met anybody like me,
Yeah.
This was the sales
Not
cycle.
very many people like you.
Well,
Bob.
the sales cycle was, I want to buy everything you offer, and I want to buy it right now. That was the sales cycle. That's how easy it was to sell me, right? So I ended up paying him like 19 grand total for like every single service. There was things that he like forgot he even did because no one ever bought the service. Wow. I'm like, yep, I want that, all of it, everything. And I just went through with him and just started doing all this shit, right? His name is John Woodruff. And I would try my absolute best to understand every single thing that was happening. And I would read the documents over and over and over and over and clear all the words and over and over and over and over. And then finally, I started to like really understand things better. And then I started creating all of my own documents. But that wasn't until like 23, 24. And then I started creating my own documents. So up until then, I was like looking at other people's documents, trying to understand, learning. And then after a year or two, then I started to create my own stuff. Like I created my own passport explanatory statement. And then in 2024, when I released the 2.0 course, I created my own trust indenture template, right? And then we created durable power of attorney templates and like all these different things, right? But that wasn't at the beginning. It was all like other people's stuff or working with John or whatever, right? So at that time, he helped me set up the trust, and he helped me send in a revocation of election to the IRS, which I don't recommend people do anymore. I had a shift on that.
From the first course to the second course.
No, it was actually even in the second course I was still recommending the revocation of election.
Oh, okay. So
I don't recommend that anymore. I shifted over to what's called the 8822B.
Oh, okay.
And I have that information's in post-course video number 2, which I shot in December.
Oh, okay.
So up until December of this last year, I was pushing the non-citizen national of the United States, and I was pushing the revocation of election, like I had been doing since the day one.
Right.
But then I had some huge, massive breakthroughs in research. I abandoned the non-citizen national of the United States, and I abandoned the revocation of election. And then now the non-citizen national of the United States has been replaced with state citizen.
Oh, okay.
Which is the same thing that you see. Richard McDonald is a huge guy when it comes to the state citizen stuff. He's real smart. He talks a lot about court cases and stuff. State citizen, you can see it in 28 USC 1332, I believe it is, which is actually the section that talks about civil jurisdiction. 1332, 28 USC 1332. 28 USC 1332, diversity of citizenship, amount in controversy, costs. The district courts shall have original jurisdiction of all civil actions where the matter in controversy exceeds the sum or value of $75,000, exclusive of interest and cost, and is in between 1, citizens of different states. So right in the diversity jurisdiction section of federal lawsuits it's talking about citizens of different states.
Is that the Cornell?
Perfect. And then if you go to the slaughterhouse cases, which is 1873,
I like that one too.
with Mr. Miller, right? Mr. Miller says straight up, right in the thing, and I'll pull up the exact quote here. He says, "It is quite clear then that there is a citizenship of the United States and a citizenship of a state, which are distinct from each other and which depend upon different characteristics or circumstances in the individual. White people are state citizens.
Right.
Released African slaves of African descent and their descendants are U.S. citizens.
U.S. capital.
Yeah.
Capitalized, right?
Yeah. U.S. citizens, United States citizens.
Because when it wasn't the United States before it was capitalized, that was like prior to 1871 or something?
They've gone back and forth on
they
that
have.
so many times. It's so
When did the
confusing.
overlay come, though? When did it actually...
1873, the slaughterhouse cases.
Okay, that's when...
Because the 14th Amendment came out, and everyone was so confused by it, especially the very first section or clause.
Oh.
Everyone was so fucking confused. Mr. Miller says in the slaughterhouse cases, the first clause has been confusing as hell, and it's been in the journals. It's been talked about by a bunch of eminent judges. Like he basically says essentially like a lot of people have been talking about this, and we're here today to settle the matter. That's what he's trying to say in the slaughterhouse cases. So everyone's confused about the 14th Amendment up until Mr. Miller in the slaughterhouse cases, and then he settled it and said, nope, there's two different types of citizenship. There's the U.S. citizen and there's the state citizen.
When did that happen?
Slaughterhouse cases, 1873.
And then what happened?
April.
And there was something that happened in 1967?
The Congress said in 1967 that the 14th Amendment was never legally ratified.
Oh, okay.
And they go on and on and on about how and why, and they have all the evidence there in the journals.
That's weird because they talk about it so much.
Well, if you
how
call,
it's like a thing.
if you try to get a passport and you go to, like, let's say 22 USC 212, 22 USC 212 says persons entitled to passport, and it says the only people who are entitled to a passport are people who have pledged allegiance to the United States, whether they're citizens or not. But then if you call the Department of State and you ask them who can get a passport, they'll tell you over the phone only U.S. citizens, but that's bullshit. That's actually not true.
Huh.
It's in the law. It's not true.
Man.
There's two classes of individuals that can get a passport. You have U.S. citizen and you have a non-citizen national of the United States, which is in 8 U.S.C. 1101, subsection A22, and then A and B. There's
So it's like
two
a
subclasses.
state citizen.
So
right?
a state citizen
Can get one.
would be a non-citizen national of the United States.
Oh, okay.
But the problem is that if you call the Department of State, or if you look on their website, they say that only people that are born in American Samoa or Guam can be non-citizen nationals of the United States. That's also bullshit. So if you try to get a state citizen, non-citizen national of the United States passport, they'll tell you they can't give it to you because you weren't born in American Samoa or Guam. That's complete bullshit. White people can't be U.S. citizens. End of fucking story. So if that's the case, the Department of State needs to be sued because that means white people can't get passports. And that's bullshit. But then it gets more complicated because when you look up the definition of the word person, it includes trusts, corporations,
This is
partnerships.
word magic, isn't it?
So what happens is they ask you for a social security number on the passport. So you got to think to yourself, if you go into Title 8 and you look up the definition of the word person, which is at 8 U.S.C. 1101 subsection B3, the definition of the word person is an individual or an organization. And then organization is defined in 8 U.S.C. 1101 subsection A28, and it includes every kind of incorporated or unincorporated club, group, partnership, chess club, knitting club. Everything under the sun, moon, and stars is included in that definition. The definition even says includes the following, but it's not even conclusive. It can include even more things than this. And it even says in the definition that even unincorporated things are also in the definition. So when you look at the definition of organization, it literally means everyone, everything, anywhere, whether incorporated or not, doesn't matter. Everything is an organization, literally. So
Now
that
I'm
means everything is a person.
Now I'm starting to understand why none of my friends want to learn anything about this, because it's like, dude, You'd have to, clear too many words, man.
It becomes circumstantial. So like there's a lot of areas, like for example, the word individual is one of the trickiest words ever, right?
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've found all these different definitions from all these different places. And then I relate all these different definitions, and there are patterns that you can see throughout every single definition.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like, it's like building a criminal case and all you have is circumstantial evidence, so you have to have a whole lot of it. So it's like you build out every single circumstantial definition of individual, every single one of which has nothing to do with a white man.
Yeah.
And then basically it's like you push that forward and you say, here's all the circumstantial evidence proving that the word individual doesn't include a white man. And then now you push that on them and now make them prove. And now they have to have at least that much circumstantial evidence proving that it would include a white man. If you look at the slaughterhouse cases, he describes state citizens, the way he describes them is using two words, the word man and the word free man. And both those words are not capitalized. Lowercase m-a-n, lowercase f-r-e-e-m-a-n. By the way, Samuel Freeman Miller, his middle name was Freeman.
Oh, yeah?
His legal middle name was Freeman. I don't know, they were probably sitting around and smoking cigars and laughing about, hey, it's your middle name, brother, So the guy giving the opinion, literally his middle name is Freeman. So his middle name would be capitalized if you said it. But when he's talking about it in the opinion, it's just a term, Freeman. No capital, right? So the way he says it's a free man or man of the union, the word union is capitalized. You don't see that terminology anywhere in the United States Code. The word man isn't used, I don't think, a single time in the entire United States Code. They use the term individual.
And what about, there's also another one you mentioned, people?
People versus persons. If you read Dred Scott versus Sanford, they start off, and the first quote, I can read it right now, I have it right here, it's very easy to find. This is actually a recent case that I read. I've talked about it a few times, but I had never taken the time to really sit down and slowly and carefully read the entire case. It's a huge case, right? So, and when I say read the entire case, I mean just the final opinion, because that's really, a lot of these final opinions are 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 pages long. So you don't need to go read the whole docket. I don't even know how you'd read the whole docket for something like Dred Scott. You would need to go down to the law library into like some kind of computerized old docketing system. I don't know how that would work because back then, 1857.
Microfiche.
I don't know. I've never done that. That would be like, if I wanted to go to the next level as a litigant and I wanted to go down and start reading dockets from the 1800s, like all the filings into the case and stuff, I don't know. I would imagine they have that down at the law library. I've never done that.
Ladies to go down there and do it for you, man.
There you go, right there, right?
Hire some girls to go down there and get it for you, man.
Those law librarians, I've said it in a couple of shows, those law librarians are fucking lonely, man, I'm telling you. So here's the quote. This is so in the Dred Scott case, this is what he says. The words, quote, people of the United States, end quote, and, quote, citizens, end quote, are synonymous terms and mean the same thing. They both describe the political body who, according to our Republican institutions, form the sovereignty and who hold the power and conduct the government through their representatives. They are what we familiarly call the sovereign people, and every citizen is one of this people and a constituent member of this sovereignty. Now, this is before the term United States citizen was redefined later in a case that overturned this case called the slaughterhouse cases, which Samuel Freeman Miller, right? So you have to make sure you understand the definitions of the words that are being used in each case, and you have to realize that after 1873, Samuel Freeman Miller redefined the term U.S. citizen to be an entirely separate class of citizenship, specifically for the released slaves of African descent and their descendants who were released after the 13th Amendment, and they had no citizenship. So the U.S. citizen term completely changed in 1873. So in 1857, it was the old definition, but it wasn't its own separate class.
Yeah,
you
I've
weren't a U.S. citizen. You could say it, but that wasn't actually a classification before 1873.
Right. I always heard that number, 1873. That's when everything kind of like, that's when this whole cloaking thing that happened, and then they just kind of used the law, and they got in there and they overlaid this thing on it. Originally, law started out kind of try to help people and have a republic. I don't know.
If you look at the history of Samuel Freeman Miller and you do a little background on him, he was really, 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 really passionate about freeing the slaves. The quotes from the Dred Scott case are shocking. I mean, they're really, 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 really shocking. I can actually read off some of the quotes, right? Like here, I'll give you some quotes from Dred Scott. You want to really have your blood boiling. Here's some quotes from Dred Scott. Here's what he says, 1857. This is before the Civil War. We're moving into the Civil War. We're not quite there yet, 1857, right?
Uh-huh.
The question before us is whether the class of persons described in the plea of abatement compose a portion of this people and are constituent members of this sovereignty. Now let's stop right there. Look at that. Already we've got something really interesting. So if we go back to that first quote, the words people of the United States and citizens are synonymous terms. And then the next section, the question before us is whether the class of persons described in the plea of abatement.
So they stuck it in there, right?
No,
there?
they didn't. At that time, the fucking blacks weren't people. I'm telling you. They legally weren't part of the definition of the word people.
So they called them persons.
So then
now they're calling us all persons.
Exactly.
Ah, that's what happened.
They weren't legally people. And I'll read this and you'll see they were not legally part of the definition of the word people.
So
if you say black man is people...
That's why you never hear people anymore when they're referring to us. We're not people anymore.
Even in a goddamn elevator, if you look at the fucking thing where it says 28... It doesn't say 28 people, it says 28 persons. It won't say max 28 people on the pool. It says max 28 persons. So by definition, that means max 28 black people of African descent or their descendants who was released by the 13th Amendment and didn't have citizenship and was given citizenship by the 14th Amendment.
Wow, man.
So here's some more quotes from Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1857, okay?
All right.
The question before us is whether the class of persons described in the plea of abatement compose a portion of this people and are constituent members of this sovereignty. So we just covered the previous quote, the people of the United States and citizens are synonymous terms and mean the same thing. They both describe the political body who, according to our Republican institutions, form the sovereignty and who hold the power and conduct the government through their representatives. They are what we familiarly call the sovereign people, and every citizen is one of these people, one of this people, and a constituent member of this sovereignty. The question before us is whether this class of persons, released African slaves or people of African descent who were there under slavery or their descendants, described in the plea of abatement, compose a portion of this people and are constituent members of this sovereignty. We think they are not. And that they are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to citizens of the United States.
And when talking about citizens of the United States, then we're talking about people.
White people.
Oh,
whites.
Okay. Yeah.
Whites, only whites.
So then they took citizen and they made it something else.
Well, later in the slaughterhouse cases.
Like in 73, right? 1873?
1873.
Wow.
So Dred Scott,
Sneaky.
this is the original.
Sneaky.
This is the original. Right now, what we're reading right now from these cases, this is OG, original America.
Wow.
This is before America was converted in 1873.
Man.
Okay. And like I was saying earlier, I don't think I finished my thought. I don't think Samuel Freeman Miller was trying to do any of this. I think he was actually a good dude. He just wanted to free the slaves, and he saw an opportunity, and it was a weird opportunity, and he just did what he had to do.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I don't think he was a bad guy, personally. If you look at the way he words it, he's trying to separate these two things out very clearly. He's trying to make it clear that there's these two separate things. It's not going to... He even says the 14th Amendment has nothing to do with state citizens. The white people are over here. You still have all your rights. The black people are over here. They're not slaves anymore. They don't have all the rights that the white people have, but they aren't slaves at least.
Okay.
That's basically the whole slaughterhouse cases in a fucking sentence. A second citizenship class was created. The slaves were released into that. they still have like fuck all for rights. They have very little rights. In fact, there's only one absolute right that a U.S. citizen has, meaning the only right that the government and no one else can take away from them is the right to physically be located essentially as a foreigner, not as a citizen, in the United States. That's it. So basically, like, and we can get into, I think it's something versus Valentine or Valentine versus somebody. It's a Puerto Rican case, Puerto Rico. The only right that a U.S. citizen has is not to be deported. I'm not kidding. It's the only right a U.S. citizen has is to not be deported.
Oh my God.
They don't have the right to pursue happiness. They don't have the right to own anything. They don't have the right to bear arms. They don't have the right to free speech. They don't have the right to rent a home or an apartment. They don't have a right to literally like walk down the street on the sidewalk. They really don't. The only right they have is they can't be deported.
Wow.
That's it. And everyone and white people are walking around telling the government that they are this class of beings.
Because you're told somewhere along the line that this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to.
Same
I'm a
question
US
though. Who
citizen.
told you? You know, it's like where did it even come
You
from?
can't even remember, man, where it first happened.
You don't even know.
You
Yeah,
don't even
it's
know.
crazy, right?
It's just like everybody knows. This is the way it is.
So
It's
here's more. Let's go more Dred Scott. Here we go. Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1857. In the opinion,
Can I take a leak real quick?
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll continue reading that.
Sure. This is a cool spot. You got the fireplace and everything. You got this fucking studio. This is cool as fuck.
fireplaces.
Yeah. I thought, when you said Van Nuys, I thought it'd be a little bit of a shithole, but this area is actually really nice and cute, actually.
I know most people think that, but there's some nice nooks and crannies off the main streets. A lot of.
I don't like parking my car in shitty places. I'm really weird about my car and stuff. And this area is totally fine.
It's nice. It's totally safe.
Totally
man.
safe. I mean, Glendale's like the nicest place, man. Glendale is like living there. I mean, it's just like heaven.
Do you know Halsey Wixer? I found out about you through him, and it was like a friend of his said, "Oh yeah, Brandon Joe Williams. He's got the free man thing or whatever. I can't remember exactly how it came about, but
yeah, people say free man of the land. But that's all bullshit.
Yeah, the sovereign citizen. I'm a sovereign."
We make a big joke out of that now.
I love the jokes you make about that.
But you saw, I mean, we can get back into this. You saw it.
Yeah.
You saw what Dred Scott versus Sanford said. It's the sovereign citizens, literally.
Yeah.
Craziness.
This is funny. It's like, I'm interviewing you, but it feels more like I'm at your lecture. And I'm an audience, man.
Well, I get excited, so you know what I mean? I get super excited,
Yeah.
So, oh, wait. What?
Are you still going?
We're all good?
Yeah, we're still
I can continue?
Yeah.
Back to Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1857. In the opinion of the court, the legislation and histories of the times and the language used in the Declaration of Independence show that neither the class of persons who had been imported as slaves nor their descendants, whether they had become free or not, were then acknowledged as part of the people, nor intended to be included in the general words used in that memorable instrument.
Wow, did you hear that, folks?
So literally, I'm not even kidding, the word persons is specifically talking about, this is what they're talking about. And what's crazy is you won't see the word people in the United States Code from the very beginning all the way to the very end. Tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of pages. You won't see the word people one fucking time.
Nope.
Because they aren't talking about people.
Not since what date? Since
57.
57.
Well, they when they changed the definition was 73. 1873.
Oh, okay. Well, they changed the definition, but it started in 57 because they were getting ready to free the slaves.
No, they were building up to it, and this case
because they were
fueled
probably
the
getting
fire.
a lot of flack. They're probably getting a lot of flack.
Well,
from
what
people.
happened was Dred Scott versus Sanford. They when you read the whole opinion, they go through every area, every culture, English culture, every single state, laws that every single state or local territory had on blacks, on mulattoes, on actual slaves, unfreed slaves. They go through slaves that were getting picked up and brought back to their owners in different areas. And they have court cases that they reviewed where a slave left one plantation and went to a different area. And at that new area, there wasn't slavery. So, like, if they get picked up, does that mean that they have to get transferred back to the original owner? Like, they go through all this stuff in the Dred Scott case. And after this, so you think to yourself, like, oh, this is just a bunch of racist pieces of shit. No, what happened was they actually went and studied every single area and the history of the entire American culture, even before 1776. They go all the way through to 1776, and then they keep going all the way into the English culture, which is where we're from in America.
Right.
They go back to like 1702 in this case. And what they're saying in this case is they're saying, guys, we've looked at everything. We've looked at everything that has ever happened going all the way back to even before America was born. And it is very, very clear that black people are not people.
Oh, God.
They just aren't.
Wow.
That's what they're saying in the Dred Scott versus Sanford case.
So when did they first start? They've had slaves ever since day one here?
Before day one.
Before day one, they were having.
And you'll see, we're going to get into that in just a second.
Oh,
So
wow.
getting back into this quote, right? It is difficult at this day to realize the state of public opinion in relation to that unfortunate race, which prevailed in the civilized and enlightened portions of the world at the time of the Declaration of Independence, and when the Constitution of the United States was framed and adopted. But the public history of every European nation displays it in a manner too plain to be mistaken. They had, for more than a century before, been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race,
Oh, my God.
either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit.
What the heck?
They're saying we can't even rule outside of this because this is so intrinsic to everything that these cultures have been based on for so long that we don't even have the ability or right to change the fucking zeitgeist of the whole goddamn culture. They couldn't even, like, when you read the whole opinion, they're like, even if we, like, not really, but even if we wanted to say something outside of this, there's so much evidence. It's so clear. It's so plain. And it's so intense. We can't. So they say systemic racism. All the liberals say systemic racism. They don't talk about this. This is the systemic racism.
I never even heard of it.
That's what I mean.
Till now.